Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, we meet with Megan Musolf, Assistant Long-Range Planner for the City of Carpinteria. Megan shares her journey from studying environmental studies at UC Santa Barbara to building a career as a planner in the public sector, where she works to implement the city's housing element programs through zoning code amendments. We discuss how student advocacy shaped her housing policy perspective and what it means to grow a network early in your career. She also serves as a social media officer for the Central Coast section of the American Planning Association, APA. Megan offers thoughtful insights for emerging professionals and a fresh take on the evolving role of young planners today. And a note before we begin, the opinions Megan shares today are on her own and do not represent the official views of the City of Carpinteria. She's here sharing her personal experiences and perspectives. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Jessa, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I'm Corinne. My pronouns are she, her.
And today we have Megan Musolf. She is the Assistant Planner of the Community Development Department with the City of Carpinteria. Thank you so much for joining us, Megan.
Thanks, Jessa and Corinne. I'm super stoked to be here today.
Yay. Well, first things first, how are you connected to AEP?
Yeah, I've been sort of tangentially connected to AEP for a couple of years, at least since the start of 2023, when I actually joined APA, the American Planning Association, as an undergrad. And our local Central Coast APA chapter does a lot of joint events with AEP. And there's also a lot of membership overlap there too as well. And also a bit after I was hired at the City of Carpinteria, we got an AEP agency membership. So I'm also a member of AEP through that. And in a cool little bit of luck, my supervisor here at the City of Carpinteria is Mindy Fogg, who is currently the California AEP president. So I get a lot of AEP through her.
Woo! Yay! Shout out to Mindy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you get to work with her. And so can you tell us a little bit more about, we want to hear about how you got to your position today, about your background, your education, any, jobs that led you to this current position, and just kind of your general interest, like what attracted you to a position within the environmental industry?
Sure, yeah. I was fortunate to grow up in a household here in California that was really environmentally minded. We had, solar panels on our house growing up. My dad has worked in the solar industry for probably over 15 years at this point. And so, when I was applying to colleges, I was very environmentally minded. I wanted to major in something that would help the world, very idealistic. And so I was accepted into the UCSB Environmental Studies program. And I graduated from UCSB with a BA in Environmental Studies. While I was going through my undergrad, lots of stuff happened. COVID hit during my freshman year, which interrupted a lot of stuff. For the first kind of half of college, I was kind of just floundering around, like taking random classes in the environmental studies department. And it wasn't until my junior year when I almost just randomly signed up for the environmental planning course. I didn't know what planning was, didn't know what the class was going to be about, but it fit in my schedule. So I signed up for it. And I am so glad that I did, because it genuinely was like a light bulb moment for me. I had realized by that point that I didn't want to be a biologist or an ecologist. I didn't really see myself, out in the field collecting soil samples. But when the concept of the urban environment, was shown to me, I like really latched on to that. So that's kind of how I found planning. I studied abroad my senior year at UCSB. I spent a semester in Berlin, Germany, which for a budding planner was absolutely amazing. Berlin is a really, really cool urban environment. I was obsessed with the public transportation, extremely sad when I came back that I still had to drive my car everywhere. I miss taking public transportation. And so then when I came back from that, I had 2 quarters left until I graduated. So I was like, oh, I need to find a job, huh? So by that point, I knew that I wanted to go into planning, and I gravitated towards the public sector because it really kind of aligned with that, desire in me to do something to help the people around me, do something to help my community. And so the thought of getting to work for a community in a public agency was really attractive to me. So I was able to, following my graduation from UCSB, intern part-time for both the City of Carpinteria and the City of Goleta. I was doing them both at the same time, which was a little bit chaotic, but super cool because I got to see how they both worked. While I was interning there, I was also then applying for some full-time positions, knowing that my internships would end. And a full-time position as an assistant planner had opened at the City of Carpinteria, and I was able to apply for that and was accepted for the position. So I've now been working full-time for the City of Carpinteria since November of 2023.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's,
you.
yeah, incredible. And, the dream, while going to school at UCSB is always to be able to stay in the Santa Barbara area. So,
Yeah.
listeners will know I'm also a UCSB grad. So A, go
Woohoo!
Gauchos, and B, yeah, really, really impressive that you could leverage, education internships into a full-time job and staying in that absolutely beautiful area.
Yeah, thank you. I feel so fortunate. I know, like you said, not a lot of people are able to do it. So happy to call the Santa Barbara area my home for a little bit longer after graduating. Yeah.
I think something too you said was, I don't know, it was kind of an aha moment for me, even though I know this, but the way for something about how you said it, it's like you said that being a biologist or ecologist and being in the field wasn't for you and you're more attracted to the urban. I think that's really important to think about for those who are still like early career or in school. There are jobs in the environmental industry that are in cities.
Yeah.
And so
There
I
are a
think
lot of
it's,
them.
yeah. And so I think so many people, and which I love, are like attracted to nature, and like who isn't, right? But it's like, they want to be in the field, but there's so many other jobs where if like that's not for you, there's a lot of other options on shaping like our urban environment through environmental policies and regulations. So I just want to point that out, that you can still do environmental work even in like a very urban setting. And I think it's very important too, to have people like you and Corinne and all the other planners out there looking out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And also kind of to that point, I think a lot of people looking to go into an environmental career think that it has to be very, STEM, very science-based. But, I didn't take that path. Like I said, I got a BA, a very like interdisciplinary degree. And honestly, my skills in the humanities are some of the ones that serve me best as a planner. So if you got a BA, there's still hope for you in the environmental field.
I love that. And then you have been involved with professional organizations since college. And can you tell us about how that has shaped your career path and your position right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I really didn't start getting involved with a lot of organizations until my junior year because when COVID pushed everything online, it was really hard to kind of get a feeling for what clubs and organizations were really about and, what they would be doing in a non-COVID environment. So my junior year, when everything kind of went back to quote unquote normal, that's kind of when I started getting involved. um, I think the biggest thing that I've really gotten out of being in professional organizations is confidence. The ability to network is great. The ability to hear about job opportunities is great, but I got a lot better at, looking for jobs and networking once I got that confidence from being in these organizations. Um, I'm on the board of our Central Coast APA chapter. I'm the social media officer. And I joined the board actually as a student rep for UCSB. And being on the board of an organization really shifted my mindset from, oh, I'm just a student who doesn't know anything yet. to I'm an emerging planner and I'm ready to learn more. And so just knowing that I was part of a group that was cheering me on was just really mentally helpful, as I was breaking out into the field. But the first organization that I really kind of aligned myself with UCSB was actually the orientation program. I was one of the orientation staffers, helping to onboard freshmen. And along with just being a really fun summer job, it gave me a ton of training in, customer service, how to answer questions from the public, how to practice empathy while still, kind of holding the line and still maintaining some rules. It was really the perfect crash course in all things soft skills, which I think a lot of professionals in our field really need. So, if you're a student, do not discount the value of an on-campus job, even if it doesn't seem super related to the career path that you're looking for. I can stop there, or I can talk a little bit
Yeah.
more.
No, we're done. We've heard enough.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No, but Megan, I love that because I worked in conference services for many of the summers and just literally working at the front desk of
Yeah.
dorms when different camps and stuff came in and out, and I always likened that to really helping the exactly what you said, the soft skills that I then used at like working as planning counter staff for the county of Ventura. And it's so like such good advice. I just want to emphasize, take that campus job, take,
Yes.
Something that maybe does make you a little bit, uncomfortable at first, but then gives you those, networking skills, personal interaction skills. It's so important for what we do. So I thought just great tie, and I love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just one thing to kind of wrap up that topic is once I did enter the working world and I got my job, being in professional organizations now has been a little bit more focused towards professional development, like getting to go to the AEP conference this year in Oxnard. And then I've gone to the APA California conferences for the last 2 years, which is just really cool, getting to know more people in the field, networking and stuff like that. So the role that professional orgs have played for me has shifted a little bit now that I'm actually in the field, but has been beneficial throughout.
And
And I think we should say too, just for anyone listening to this and likes to hear Megan's story and wants to, explore a leadership position on either a state board or local chapter board or even something, like a event planning committee, definitely, contact your local chapter board, contact me if it's interested in the state board, and we can see what vacancies there are and how we can get any of you a little bit more involved in AEP.
So I was going to say something less tactical than that, but to add to that is that I think there can be, especially for earlier career people, but even some more mid to senior career, people think they'll say, well, I don't have experience in this, or I don't have anything to add, or I'm not qualified. And it's like, it's a volunteer organization. Yeah. And so any help is help. And so also, if you show up and raise your hand and you're interested, like there's always something that you can help with. And I think even if it's not, and this, I'm saying this more broadly too, with any board or professional organization, is even if there's not like an official position, like for instance, like reaching out to someone like Corinne or Megan with APA at the Central Coast chapter, there's usually something you can just say, hey, I see there's no vacancies, but I want to get involved. Can I volunteer and help? Like there's always something to do. And so I just want to reinforce the fact that you might not think you don't need the experience. You can get the experience as long as you're willing to put in the work and learn and like show up, raise your hand and do what you say you're going to do.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. The most valuable thing you can bring to a group is your time and attention, like 100%.
Yes. So yeah, that was all really good points. Thank you for sharing that, Megan. And then this kind of dovetails onto that a little bit, and you kind of got into this, but for early career professionals or any really of us, it's always good to hear good tips, but what's some advice that you have for those who are trying to build their network?
Yeah. I think a lot of young people maybe dread networking a little bit and, going to networking events in particular, because it kind of just feels like you're talking about yourself the whole time and you're just giving your elevator pitch over and over and over. And, that is definitely part of it. You do kind of have to be on the whole time. But something that I've found that makes events like this a little bit easier, especially if you're a student or just getting started in a position, is that you're also asking other people what they do. And so you get to spend a lot of time also just listening to people tell their stories. You don't have to walk away from every networking event feeling like you just found your new professional bestie. Even if you walk away from an event just with an interesting backstory that you heard from someone, that's still valuable to kind of mull over in your mind and think about. Because, kind of like, well, I think a lot of people find planning in a really roundabout way, through biology or engineering or even like the legal field, maybe. And so, pulling those stories out of people, like, how did you find planning? Or, generally applicable to the environmental field, how did you find your job? Like, I love hearing those little backstories. I've met people who were history and philosophy majors and are now planners, and they're doing great at what they do. So, you know, asking people how they found their job is it's a small talk question, but it's a little bit beefier than that. It lets people kind of get into their interesting backstories. But a tip maybe for students in particular that I always like to bestow this nugget of wisdom is to go to office hours. Talk to your professor or your lecturer at least one time in person, face to face. You don't have to go with like a pre-planned agenda or discussion. Just get on their radar, let them know that you're interested. Just getting in there and introducing yourself is half the battle. Every professor that I went to their office hours at least once, they remembered me. And I've even had some instances where professors or lecturers even reached out to me after the course had ended with additional resources because they remembered, that I had introduced myself, expressed interest, came to office hours, um, that sort of thing. And I guess finally, in terms of networking tips, I think that my generation does have a lot of things kind of going against us in the professional world. Like social media sucks in a lot of ways. But one pro in the working world is that you get to follow all those local organizations that you're interested in, and your social media feed can kind of turn into automatic reminders about events that are going on, resources, things like that. Don't discount newsletters as well. I'm like constantly giving people my email, like put me on your newsletter, put me on your newsletter. Like I want to hear about all of it. So do that as well. But I think to summarize, my overall piece of advice is just to show up, meet people, go to multiple events, allow your face and your name to become recognizable. And of course, in all of your encounters, just be a kind person. People appreciate that too.
That's great advice. I love the social media aspect too, because you can teach your algorithm, like you can train it how you want to receive news, right? And so, like you said, like by following these organizations or topics that you're interested in, and there can be so many things you don't know about, but you'll start to see more and more if you are tracking that or getting alerts in your feed. And I think once you start to seek it out and like sign up for APA, AEP, whatever organization, newsletters. There's a lot of local, like, I don't know if this is everywhere. San Diego has green drinks. Like there's so much stuff you can do. And then if you sign up for the newsletters, then you get alerted. And, like you said, I think showing up is probably the hardest part, just like the gym.
Yes.
And how has your view of planning changed or evolved since you've started working full time? And, what was some stuff that you might have been unexpected for you, at work, outside of work, just as you're fully immersed now in this full-time role as a planner? What's it like on that side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess something to kind of bring up first, just more on like the personal level, is I basically jumped immediately from being a full-time student to being a full-time, 9 to 5 office employee, which was a really, really dramatic shift in my lifestyle and my schedule and all that kind of stuff. So that first year working full-time was kind of a rough personal transition for me. I felt kind of lonely. A lot of my friends left Santa Barbara after graduating. I felt kind of stuck in that loop of like wake up, go to work, come home, make dinner, do the dishes, go to bed, repeat, repeat, repeat. And it's taken me a long time to adapt to that kind of routine. So, if you're a student about to graduate or you are a recent graduate and you're kind of, feeling that, know that you're not alone. That transition to the working world is difficult. Um, but in terms of, kind of what did I think planning was versus what planning actually is, I've learned that as a public sector planner, a lot of what I do is write staff reports. And I did not particularly like writing essays and papers in college, but oh man, I am so glad that I did have to do all of that because my job is like 75% professional. Hey pup, is like 75% professional and technical writing. Um, so that's one thing. And as a long range planner, where I kind of work on the city's planning policy, I also get to work with our city attorneys a lot, which is something that I never expected. I get to interact a lot with our legal team. I'm doing a lot of back and forth with them, edits, getting really in the weeds sometimes about, how do we word this so that, the city isn't open to legal challenge and stuff like that. So kind of fun. I get to do a little bit of law without having any legal background at all. Not that I'm even close to being a lawyer, but you're working on implementing policy, so it gets pretty in the weeds there. And the other thing that I've definitely learned since becoming a planner is it has been so eye-opening to actually see the development process, like, from an application getting turned in to something actually getting finalized out in the field. An application comes in, we have to deem it complete, which is a whole process in itself. Then it has to go through planning review, and that involves public hearings. And once it gets planning permits, then it has to get building permits, and so there's all of these processes that to a lay person, you don't see all of that. And so, I used to think in college, like, why does it take so long to get a building built? It can't be that hard. And now that I work for a city, I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally see why it takes, multiple years for this kind of stuff to happen. So that's been a really, really eye-opening process since joining the planning field for sure.
That's great insight. And I like to your first comment about or your earlier comment about transitioning from a college class schedule to a 9 to 5, because it's been a while since I made that transition, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a big shift. But I really like hearing about that, and from your perspective, and then like the involvement and the work that you were able, like your education and how you're able to apply it to your current job. And even though it might not be sometimes the most exciting thing to learn about all the time, like the real world applicability of it is very helpful to have that kind of experience, and to be able to bring that to whatever career you're in is probably so helpful for your team and your employer and your career advancement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my ability to get in the weeds and to kind of like nerd out about certain stuff has been really helpful. Like I'm kind of my team's go-to person on like when a new law, comes out, it's like, "Oh, Megan, can you go read that for us?" and kind of like report back on what it means. So,
You're right,
yeah.
gladly.
I mean, you've captured probably my two favorite things, which is definitely being the legal or like lawyer adjacent in the work we do. And then, the fact that every project, every document is, different.
Yeah.
So you always get to learn something new, and you get to deep dive into, whether it's like floor area ratio or you have fairy shrimp on this project, and now you know everything you could have ever possibly wanted to know about fairy shrimp. And it's just, there are going to be no two projects are exactly the same, and you can be building the same thing on adjacent parcels of land and it's not going to be the same both times. And I think that's, one of the things that makes this profession so exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like to call it, being a specialist for a day. I'm working on one project and, I get to learn a whole lot about that and it's relevant to me for like 4 months. And then I move on to the next project. I'm learning about something else.
I tell my SMEs, it's like, I know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one thing we wanted to ask you about was at UCSB was the CHAMP project. So maybe Corinne, I don't know, since you're more involved, if you want to take the lead on that question or give a little bit more context, and then we can hear from Megan.
Yeah, or make, if I butcher this, Megan, like, please jump in. But
I was like, I'm going to butcher this. Yeah. Someone else.
It made, I think, national headlines.
Yes.
And certainly within the UCSB alumni community, it was a hot topic of discussion. But there was, campus housing proposed called Munger Hall that basically simulated a lot of, let's say, like, desirable living conditions. So it was, I think, largely windowless. And was, the universities, or a donor to the university's proposal to a very real problem, which is how do we create more campus housing? And both on campus, outside of campus, I think there was a lot of backlash to what the proposal was. And Megan, you got to experience, a very real part of that backlash. So maybe feel free to correct anything if I misframed it. And then, we super interested to hear what your experience was, in the thick of it.
The story of Munger Hall is also like my planner origin story. So I feel like I will always be intrinsically tied to this crazy project that was proposed on the UCSB campus. But yeah, Munger Hall was this residence hall proposed at UCSB. They first said it was going to be 11 stories, and they cut it down to 9 stories. And it was basically designed as a giant block, so that most of the bedrooms were completely interior with no windows. And the university was seriously considering this really out there design because Charlie Munger, who designed it and has since passed away, was going to donate $200 million to it on the condition that the school follow his design exactly. So kind of a wild, setup going on there. And in 2023, the university officially announced that the project was dead, wasn't going forward. And I like to think that that's partially because it got so much critical feedback. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this project. So the organization CHAMP, which stands for Campus Housing Alternatives to Munger Hall, Please, was formed in early 2022, and it was a collaboration between some current students and some UCSB alumni. And the goal of the organization was to bring together different campus stakeholders, primarily students and alumni, to oppose the design of Munger Hall while also advocating for better on-campus housing and more on-campus housing that prioritized student well-being, because windowless bedrooms don't really prioritize student well-being. And CHAMP, this organization, was happening in tandem with the advanced environmental planning class at UCSB, which at that time was being taught by Rita Bright. And I was also in that class. Once we realized how passionate our class was about this whole Munger Hall issue, Rita just let us chuck the syllabus out the window and just work on this project for the rest of the quarter.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And our collaborative class project became an alternatives to Munger Hall project. So it was an analysis of the proposed project, why it was inconsistent with planning documents and planning policy. And then we provided a project alternative that would still provide the number of student beds that the university needed, but in a decent way, in a way that promoted student well-being. So CHAMP, the organization, organized a public meeting for, all campus stakeholders to come. It was free. We also live streamed the event. And so we had a representative there from the university who first gave a presentation on Munger Hall. Then our class gave a presentation on our project and our alternatives to Munger Hall. And then we opened it up for public comment and got to hear from the public what they all thought about Munger Hall and our proposed project. And as I'm sure you can imagine, it was very interesting. And there were a lot of really strong opinions expressed by members of the public. So that whole, Munger Hall situation really was my foray into planning and a really good, real world example. We really got to ground our, planning education to that point in a real world project.
That's incredible. And when you were developing the alternative, you mentioned number of beds, but were there any other key constraints that, you needed to follow? Like I assume cited in either the same or similar footprint, was cost an issue?
Yeah, we didn't have the resources to do very in-depth cost analysis. So we were doing it a little bit more conceptually. We focused a lot more on where could student housing be added on the campus. So obviously still the same location as Munger Hall, but just using a different design. But we also looked at other locations on campus and existing student housing to see, could they retrofit this? Could they, build up a little bit? Some of the oldest student housing over on the east side, those classic freshman residence halls, Anacapa, Santa Cruz.
Anacapa!
Me too. That's so funny. But yeah, we were looking at, how could we build on top of these? How could we improve these to house more students and still, an effective and safe way? Because the triples that are there already are kind of gnarly when you've got 3 people in those little rooms. So we were looking a little bit more at like siting and then how could we phase the project to, build new housing and then go back and retrofit some of these older housing sites.
That's really interesting. And I love, as you said, like the real world applicability of being, I also love the please in Champ. I think that's so endearing. Like
maybe it was a little bit, I didn't come up with that, but maybe it was a little bit of a backronym. Like, CHAM wasn't quite there, but Champ is really good.
I kind of thought that.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe, but I think, I just love it. It's very like, it's like desperation, like in politeness at the same time. And what a cool way. It's like a grassroots movement. I think it's just such an inspiring thing to be a part of and a special thing for you, but also a good story to show how you can make such a difference. And so if there is something that you disagree with, and collaborating, finding out the other people and organizing and elevating that, and then being able, like, you're so fortunate to have a professor who is like, okay, let's apply this and like give you all the chance to come up with these alternative designs and do the public engagement. And just like from like the conception to the end result is just an incredible story. And I think just a real, hopefully, key takeaway for other people to hear that if, you can speak up and you can get organized, use the system, CEQA, the laws and regulations we have as a way to voice your opinions.
Yeah.
And get better projects.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, we were using, policy analysis to do activism, which doesn't, the technicality of that and then, the very emotional side of activism don't seem to overlap. But I mean, that's how real change happens is through policy.
Well, such a huge shout out to your professor too, because it's kind of scary sometimes to throw out your syllabus or your way of doing things when an opportunity arises, and I can only imagine how much more you got out of this experience than if you followed what I'm sure was a very good syllabus. But it takes courage to do that, and that's incredible.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for Rita Bright and for all of my classmates. Like, it was a very, very collaborative project. and such a cool experience. And I've talked with Rita after the class ended, and she's like, I'm so glad that we did this project and didn't just follow the syllabus. It was way better for you guys.
That's what I was gonna say. It was probably a much better experience educationally for all of you too. But yeah, I agree. Like easier like said than done.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, Megan, we're about at the end of our time, but I really would love to talk about housing and policy and all that more because, in California, it's such a big challenge. But well, on that note, though, I think we'll just save that for another discussion maybe in the future and
Sure, yeah.
get into the wrap up rapid five. All right. So first of all, what is your favorite daily habit?
That would have to be the fact that I put on a good playlist every single morning when I drive to work. It's like 20 minutes of unskippable time. I have to drive to work, so I always use it to just put on music that puts me in a good mood for the day.
I love it. 3 things you take to a deserted island.
Ooh, notebooks and paper for doing some creative writing. Face soap to wash my face because I always feel like 500% better after washing my face. It's like an instant pick me up. And tahini seasoning, because if I'm on a tropical deserted island, tahini is so good on fruit. So I would just put tahini on all of the fruit that I
love that. Those are some new ones we haven't heard. What's your favorite environmental policy?
Mixed use zoning. Generally, I'm going to give you a very blanket answer. I'm not like a VMT expert or anything, but I think just letting people live near other things that they need is good environmental policy.
Our urban planner here. Okay. Favorite flora or fauna?
Absolutely, hands down, the California poppy. I have a big poster of them in my bedroom. I painted them on my graduation cap. I don't have any tattoos, but if I did get one, it would probably be a California poppy.
Ooh, yeah. Keep us posted on that one. And then finish this sentence. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if more things were sold in bulk bins or without packaging? I hate unnecessary plastic. It just really, really gets me. And I also read that headline recently that we all have a disposable spoon's worth of plastic in our brains, which was quite alarming to hear about. So wouldn't it be cool if we could buy things in bulk and not individually wrapped?
Yes, here. Well, thank you so much, Megan. We really enjoyed hearing from you and your perspective and appreciate your time joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jess and Corinne. This was awesome.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.